Welcome the anointed ones. Be careful whose name you whisper in darkness. The same energy you summon might one day answer your own call. That's not superstition. That's universal mathematics. Energy doesn't take sides. It takes notes. And lately, it's been cashing every check that jealous hearts tried to write against you, chosen one. What we're seeing now isn't karma. It's divine bookkeeping, and the numbers are finally aligning. The same mouths that used your name as a curse word are now whispering prayers for their own survival. Let's be real. This is getting ugly. The same people who once smirked at your pain are now living inside the very chaos they wished upon you. It's poetic justice with a plot twist no one saw coming. They didn't realize that God doesn't just vindicate his chosen, he educates their enemies in the process. Every rumor they started became a riddle they now have to solve. Every trap they set has become a treadmill. They're running in circles, sweating over their own schemes. Here's a chilling fact. Psychologists have confirmed that envy doesn't just distort perception, it physically weakens the immune system. In other words, the moment they began to obsess over your downfall, their own body began turning on them. And that's exactly what's happening spiritually right now. Their energy, once aimed at you, is now devouring the hands that threw it. You see, while they were busy plotting your funeral, heaven was quietly scheduling your promotion. They thought your silence meant defeat, but it was actually incubation. Now your name is resurfacing in rooms they never imagined, not as gossip, but as grace. And the unsettling part? They can't escape the reflection anymore. Every curse they crafted is looping back like a boomerang on repeat. So grab your spiritual popcorn, chosen one, because this isn't revenge, it's revelation. The same storm they prayed would drown you is now flooding their own foundations. And somewhere deep inside, they know. They weren't fighting you. They were fighting divine order. Number 1. They tried to write your ending while standing in their own beginning. That's the tragedy of arrogance, believing they could narrate a story they didn't author. They looked at a single chapter of your struggle and thought they could predict the whole book. What they didn't know was that your script was sealed in a divine archive they could never access. Every word they spoke against you was not creative power. It was self-indictment. When people try to play God in someone else's destiny, they end up becoming characters in a story they were never meant to control. They expected your pain to end you. They watched, waiting for proof that you were as weak as they said. When you stumbled, they cheered. When you went silent, they misread it as surrender. But life was only resetting your stage. While they were talking, heaven was rewriting your role. The same mouths that cursed you unknowingly became instruments in your testimony. Their gossip became your evidence, their judgment became your promotion, and their certainty about your failure became the prophecy of their own downfall. The irony is painful. They were so sure they could define your limit, but they were only revealing theirs. When someone speaks death over another person's purpose, they speak from their own expiration date. You can't curse what's chosen. You can only expose how disconnected you are from the source. They tried to write you out of existence without realizing the author was still writing through you. That's why your story continued, even when they stopped believing. Now, their words have turned on them. The same energy they poured into predicting your fall is what's now collapsing their peace. They can't sleep well, not because you did anything, but because spiritual law doesn't tolerate false prophecy. Every lie they told created a vibration that had to land somewhere. And since you outgrew the level it was aimed at, it bounced back to its sender. They wanted to narrate your ending. Instead, they're now trapped in the opening scene of their own lesson, the one where they finally realize that no human being gets to play narrator over another person's destiny. They spoke too soon, and now life itself is correcting their script with poetic precision. Number 2, the trap they built required your fall to function, so when you rose, it collapsed. Every setup they created depended on one thing: you staying broken. Their lies needed your silence. Their image of you needed your weakness. Their stories about you only worked if you never healed. The moment you stood up, the entire foundation of their manipulation cracked. They didn't realize their power over you existed only as long as you remained wounded. The second you found your strength, the energy holding their schemes together lost its balance. They built their confidence on your pain. It gave them a sense of superiority to believe you'd never recover. They fed off the idea that you were too damaged to rise, too naive to see through them, too kind to fight back. But when you began to rebuild yourself, piece by piece, they panicked. Suddenly, the version of you they used to control no longer existed. Every move they made was designed for the old you, the one who doubted, apologized too much, and tried to prove your worth. That version of you was their playground, but once you evolved, their strategies became outdated, useless, and self-destructive. They tried to trap you with gossip, but your truth became too visible. They tried to isolate you, but solitude became your sanctuary. They tried to make people turn on you, but you turned inward and found your own power. Everything that was meant to contain you became the soil that grew you. They were counting on you to break down, not break through. When you didn't give them the reaction they expected, it destroyed the structure of their plan. They were like architects of disaster, watching their own blueprint crumble under divine weight. Now the energy of their intent is feeding on itself. The lies they told are haunting them. The people they used to recruit against you are questioning their motives. Their alliances are turning into accusations, because when a trap loses its target, it resets itself. What they built for you has now become their reality: confusion, exposure, and regret. You didn't have to fight back. You only had to rise. And the moment you did, their entire illusion collapsed under the truth of your survival. They tried to bury you in their chaos, but all they did was build their own prison. Number 3. What they called judgment on you was actually a mirror on themselves. Every time they pointed fingers, they were revealing the parts of their soul they refused to face. They thought they were exposing your flaws, but they were confessing their own. That's the twisted beauty of projection. People will accuse you of what they secretly wrestle with in silence. When they called you fake, it was because they were pretending. When they said you were manipulative, it was because they were calculating. When they painted you as unstable, it was because their world was already crumbling behind closed doors. You were never the problem. You were just the mirror, too honest for their comfort. They used your life as a scapegoat for their guilt. It was easier to label you the villain than to admit the darkness they carried. The way they talked about you gave them temporary relief, a false sense of moral superiority. But truth has a way of resurfacing, and now their words have circled back like evidence in a courtroom. Everything they said about you has found its way into their own experience. The judgment they tried to pass has turned into a reflection they can't escape. It's no longer you they're fighting. It's their own reflection looking back at them. You never had to defend yourself, because time became your witness. Life itself exposed who was telling the truth. The irony is, they never even hated you. They hated how your light made their shadows visible. You triggered what they were trying to suppress. Your confidence highlighted their insecurity. Your honesty revealed their deceit. You were simply living, but your existence disrupted the false reality they built to feel powerful. They mistook that disruption as threat, not realizing it was an invitation to heal. Instead of facing themselves, they tried to destroy the mirror. Now they can't escape the very energy they put out. Their words replay in their own life. Their gossip returns through different faces. Their accusations turn into lessons. That's how divine justice works, not through punishment, but through reflection. What they once declared over your life has become the soundtrack of their own downfall. They didn't expose you. They exposed the hidden fractures in themselves. You just stood there, silent, and watched truth do what revenge never could. Reveal everything. Number 4. They didn't just lose you. They lost access to grace that covered them through you. Some people never realize that being connected to you was their protection until the shield is gone. You weren't just a friend, partner, or family member. You were a divine covering in human form. While they mocked you, used you, or underestimated you, they were standing under an invisible shelter built by your prayers, your compassion, and your obedience to God. You were interceding for them without even knowing it, protecting them from storms they didn't even see coming. Now that you've walked away, that shield has lifted, and for the first time, they're feeling what real spiritual exposure feels like. When you were around, their life had a strange kind of order to it. Opportunities opened, things seemed to flow, doors didn't close as fast, and chaos somehow stayed at a distance. They thought it was luck or their own strength. They didn't know that your presence balanced the energy in their space. You absorbed a lot of what was meant to hit them. You diffused their storms just by being aligned with divine favor. But they took that for granted, mistaking your calmness for weakness and your forgiveness for foolishness. When you finally detached, they felt an immediate spiritual drought. Nothing worked the same. The people they used to impress turned distant. The opportunities they once bragged about started drying up. Even their confidence began to shrink. That's not coincidence. That's consequence. The grace that surrounded them was never theirs to own. It was flowing through you. They were borrowing peace, favor, and stability that didn't belong to them. Once you were gone, the loan expired. Now the storms you used to block for them are hitting them full force. They're confused, anxious, and restless, trying to figure out why life suddenly feels heavier. But what they're really feeling is the absence of divine coverage. You were their spiritual firewall, and now that it's lifted, the attacks they once threw at you are circling back and landing on them. They thought losing you meant losing a person. They didn't know it meant losing access to protection, wisdom, and unseen mercy. They're just now realizing that grace wasn't following them. It was following you, and they were only safe because they were standing close to you. Number 5. The same tongues that tried to bury you are now summoning help for themselves. It's almost poetic how life has flipped the script. The very voices that once laughed at your pain, whispered lies about your name, and tried to poison your reputation, are now trembling under the weight of their own words. They thought their gossip was harmless, that their slander would never come back to haunt them. But words don't die. They multiply. Every sentence they spoke against you carried energy, and now that energy has matured and returned home, looking for its true owner. They didn't realize that every insult was a seed. Every rumor, every sarcastic remark, every malicious joke was being recorded in a realm they couldn't see. You absorbed those words, but you didn't react. You let divine justice handle them. And now the harvest has come, not in your favor out of vengeance, but out of balance. The words they released are echoing back to them in the form of sleepless nights, broken relationships, and unexplained setbacks. What they wished for you has become their everyday reality, not because you wanted revenge, but because the universe always returns mail to the sender. They mocked your name in public to gain validation. They needed to make you look small so they could feel powerful. But your silence became their mirror. And now that same audience is watching them unravel. The spotlight they once used to expose you is now exposing their own corruption. The same energy they used to dig your grave has now dug a trench they can't climb out of. They're praying for relief from the same storm they forecasted for you. Now their words choke them. The same mouths that once celebrated your supposed failure are begging for forgiveness in private. Some are even trying to rewrite history, pretending it never happened. But spiritual law doesn't forget. Every tongue that rose against you in judgment has turned on its owner, not because you fought back, but because truth always defends the innocent in silence. They tried to bury you under lies, but they ended up burying themselves under the weight of their own deceit. And now, the only prayer they can whisper is the one they once mocked you for. God, please have mercy. Number 6. You became proof that energy can't be destroyed, only redirected. Everything they threw at you had to go somewhere. The gossip, the lies, the jealousy. It didn't just disappear into thin air. But because your spirit had evolved beyond bitterness, it couldn't stick to you. Instead, that negative energy transformed. What was meant to drain you became fuel. What was sent to break you became momentum. You learned to turn their attacks into awareness, their envy into motivation, and their darkness into wisdom. That's not luck. That's mastery. It's the spiritual version of alchemy, turning poison into power without ever lifting a finger. People underestimate how energy really works. It doesn't vanish because someone moves on. It travels, transforms, and returns to its source. So when they were busy sending you bad energy, they didn't realize they were setting up a system that would later mirror their intentions back to them. They called it karma, but it's actually law, the same kind of law that governs gravity and motion. Everything released must complete its circuit. When you refused to fight dirty or stoop to their level, you didn't just take the high road, you rerouted the energy flow. You became the conductor of something divine. While they were consumed with bitterness, you were busy healing. While they were hoping you'd fall, you were building something unshakable. That's why their energy never destroyed you. It became the raw material for your transformation. The very storms they sent your way became wind for your wings. Their hostility gave you sharper discernment. Their rejection forced you into alignment. Their hate clarified your purpose. What they didn't understand is that when you're chosen, everything, even evil intentions, must serve your evolution. Now the current has reversed. The same energy they poured out returns to them exactly how they left it, messy, chaotic, and unresolved. You don't even have to watch it happen. You can feel it in the atmosphere. Their anger no longer affects you because it's lost its target. It has nowhere to land but back where it started. That's not magic. That's divine physics. You didn't destroy their energy. You elevated beyond its reach. You became living proof that when light refuses to bow to darkness, darkness ends up consuming itself. Number 7. Their suffering isn't random. It's the echo of what they sent into the universe. Every word, thought, and intention has a vibration, and those vibrations always return to their origin. The universe doesn't operate on favoritism. It operates on alignment. What you release, you eventually meet again. So when they whispered against you, when they laughed at your struggle, when they celebrated your pain, they were unknowingly constructing the walls of their own future. Each cruel thought was a sound wave bouncing off the universe's laws, waiting for the right moment to echo back. And now that echo has arrived. It's not coincidence that their peace feels disturbed, that doors they once easily walked through are now locked, or that the same ridicule they threw at you is being hurled at them. It's not punishment, it's reflection. The universe doesn't revenge, it reveals. It shows people exactly what they've sown, not to destroy them, but to expose the truth of their vibration. They thought you were cursed, but what they were feeling was the echo of their own projection coming home to roost. When they wished for your failure, they didn't just create bad energy for you, they branded their own destiny with bitterness. The louder they mocked, the stronger the vibration became. Every time they gathered to gossip, that frequency multiplied. By the time it came back, it wasn't just a whisper anymore, it was a storm. And now, they're standing in the very emotional and spiritual weather they created, the same atmosphere they once hoped you'd drown in. The universe doesn't forget. It simply waits until alignment demands response. And because you grew, healed, and elevated instead of retaliating, you rose above the frequency of their attack. That's why it couldn't touch you. It was too dense for your new vibration. So it did the only thing energy can do when rejected by light. It returned to its sender. Now they're learning that suffering isn't always random. Sometimes it's just the universe handing back the energy receipt. What they're facing now is the sound of their own intentions echoing through divine law. Every cruel laugh, every deceitful whisper, every hidden wish against you has found its way back home, louder, heavier, and undeniable. Number 8. They mocked you for suffering lessons they now have to learn without grace. When you were going through your storm, they called it failure. They saw your quiet season and assumed you were being punished, not realizing you were being prepared. While you were learning obedience, patience, and discernment, they were busy laughing from the sidelines, mistaking divine discipline for defeat. They didn't understand that when God isolates you, He's not rejecting you. He's refining you. Every sleepless night, every heartbreak, every unanswered prayer was building a foundation they couldn't see. You were being taught through mercy. They're now being taught through consequence. They thought your tears were signs of weakness, but they were actually cleansing. They thought your isolation meant abandonment, but it was insulation, protection from energies that couldn't walk with you into your next level. The pain that they ridiculed was sacred. It had purpose. It was the kind of pain that rearranges destiny, the kind that comes with grace covering every mistake. But they didn't understand that. They laughed while you were shedding layers that no longer served your future. They mocked a metamorphosis because it looked like a breakdown. Now, the same lessons you cried your way through are knocking on their door, except theirs come without the covering you had. You were corrected with love. They're being corrected through exposure. You had grace to stumble and rise again. They have to face truth without cushion. That's what makes the difference. You were molded. They're being broken. You were in class. They're in court. Your pain was an initiation. Theirs is revelation. What they called your downfall was actually your transformation. Now they're walking through the same fire, but it burns differently when grace isn't guiding it. They used to joke about your healing journey, calling it unnecessary, dramatic, or delusional. But now they understand the process they mocked was the very one that could have saved them. Your pain gave birth to purpose. Theirs is birthing humility. You cried your way into strength. They're being humbled into silence. That's the difference between those chosen for refinement and those chosen for realization. One learns through love, the other through loss. Number 9. They didn't realize you were the test, not the target. You were never sent to destroy them, you were sent to reveal them. God placed you in their lives as a mirror, a quiet opportunity for them to show who they truly were when faced with purity, light, and authenticity. But instead of honoring what they were being shown, they reacted from their wounds. They mistook your goodness for weakness and your humility for naivety. In truth, you were their exam paper, and every interaction was a question designed to expose their character. Sadly, when the test came, they chose pride over growth. They were being tested on how they handled someone who meant no harm, someone who came in peace but carried power. Every chance they had to show empathy, they chose envy. Every opportunity to speak truth, they chose gossip. Every moment to protect, they chose betrayal. They thought they were playing you, but they were grading themselves. They failed not because they were bad people, but because their hearts weren't ready for honesty. They didn't know that the way they treated you would determine their next season. Their behavior toward you was heaven's measurement of their readiness for elevation. And when they mishandled you, they forfeited favor. Now life is echoing that result back to them. The instability they wished on you is haunting their own steps. The isolation they forced you into is now their reality. The loss they mocked you for has become their lesson. The irony is almost painful. Everything they tried to inflict on you has become the very language life uses to speak back to them. It's not revenge, it's reflection. God doesn't punish people with fire. He reveals them through mirrors. They never understood that the chosen ones don't come to destroy, they come to expose. Your presence was their chance to evolve. They could have grown from your example, learned from your peace, or absorbed some of your light. But they rejected it. Now the same test they failed with you has been rescheduled in their own lives. Only this time, there's no grace period. What they mocked as weakness was actually their moment of judgment. And the saddest part? They still don't realize the exam they failed was never about you. It was always about them. Number 10, you outgrew their warfare. And that's why it turned on them. Every plan, lie, and manipulation they aimed at you was designed for a version of you that no longer exists. Their attacks were targeted at your insecurities, your pain, your confusion, not your healed, awakened, and grounded self. When you grew in awareness, you changed frequency. You became spiritually untraceable. The weapons they once used so easily suddenly stopped working. Not because they became weaker, but because you stopped being reachable. Energy can't hit what no longer vibrates at the same level. The moment you rose, the map of your enemies became useless. They kept launching emotional traps and psychological games, expecting the same reactions, but nothing landed. You stopped responding to their bait. You no longer defended yourself, chased closure, or tried to explain your heart to those committed to misunderstanding it. That silence wasn't weakness, it was spiritual advancement. You weren't fighting back, you had simply transcended the entire battlefield. That's when the reversal began. Because their energy couldn't find its target, it started to feed on itself. The manipulation turned inward, the lies tangled around them. Their chaos started to mirror everything they once wished on you. What used to hurt you now exposes them. What used to drain you now drains them. Their gossip circles have turned toxic, not because of anything you did, but because the vibration they were operating from no longer has a host. You left that frequency behind, and when you did, all the darkness they projected began collapsing inward. That's why so many of them are living in mental fog and confusion. They don't understand how they went from feeling powerful to feeling powerless. It's because the spiritual infrastructure of their warfare fell apart when you evolved. Growth became your greatest defense. You didn't need to fight, you only needed to ascend. When you stopped reacting, you shifted dimensions. When you healed, you changed your spiritual address. Their strategies became outdated, and their energy had no direction but back to them. That's not coincidence, that's divine law. They are now at war with the very weapons they forged against you, realizing too late that every attack loses strength the moment its target outgrows the battlefield. Number 11. They wanted you broken because your wholeness exposed their fragmentation. Your presence didn't just challenge their comfort, it revealed their inner disorder. People who haven't faced their pain can't stand those who've made peace with theirs. Your balance highlighted their instability. Your growth forced them to see how much of their identity was built on pretending. You became a walking reminder of everything they suppressed. And instead of choosing self-reflection, they chose to resent you. It wasn't that you did anything wrong. It's that you became proof that healing is possible, and that terrified them. Your peace wasn't loud, but it was confronting. When you walked into rooms, your calm energy silently dismantled the illusions people lived by. They had to either rise to meet that vibration or attack it to feel safe. Many chose the latter. They picked you apart, mocked your faith, minimized your progress, all because it mirrored what they refused to fix within themselves. You were never the problem. You were the reflection they couldn't handle. Their goal was to break you so they wouldn't have to face themselves. If they could keep you shattered, they could keep avoiding their own cracks. But you refused to collapse. You stayed grounded, even when it would have been easier to conform or retaliate. That strength didn't come from pride. It came from the quiet understanding that you've already been through worse. You've survived battles they couldn't imagine, so their attempts to destroy you only revealed their own fragility. The irony is that the very traits they mocked, your kindness, restraint, and humility, were the traits that kept you protected. Now, stripped of your reflection, they can no longer borrow light to hide their shadows. They're left face to face with their emptiness, and it's uncomfortable. The peace they once ridiculed now haunts them because it reminds them what alignment looks like. Their chaos has no anchor anymore, and their envy has no outlet. You were never meant to stay broken to make others comfortable. Your wholeness was always meant to reveal truth, and truth always disrupts illusions. They wanted you shattered, but you became the mirror they could no longer stand to look into. Number 12. What they called revenge was actually you being recycled into purpose. They assumed their betrayal would bury you, that by smearing your name they could strip you of value. What they didn't realize is that nothing touched by divine purpose can be discarded, only refined. You were never being thrown away. You were being transformed. Every insult, every rumor, every attempt to break your reputation became raw material in the hands of God. They mistook your isolation for punishment, not realizing it was divine renovation. A quiet moment where heaven was redesigning your life for impact beyond their understanding. Their version of revenge was short-sighted. They thought removing you from circles or opportunities would erase your relevance, but all they did was clear your schedule for elevation. When you were being rejected, you were actually being redirected. When you were being mocked, heaven was quietly marketing you. You didn't need to fight back because your vindication was being written into your evolution. What they tried to make look like your downfall became the platform for your visibility. The same crowd that laughed at your pain now watches you move, in purpose they can't explain. The universe has a recycling system that human ego will never comprehend. When people try to contaminate your name with lies, that negativity gets filtered through divine intention. What comes out the other side is something purer, stronger, and more anointed. Your broken moments became sacred material for your calling. Every betrayal became the blueprint for your discernment. Every rejection gave you direction. You now know exactly who belongs in your life and who doesn't. Meanwhile, the energy they used to attack you never left circulation. It just returned home. Their gossip became their stagnation. Their manipulation became their exposure. You didn't have to curse them. Their own energy did the job. You simply kept evolving, kept healing, kept walking in alignment. That's not revenge. That's divine recycling. You didn't rise to get even. You rose because purpose demanded elevation. They thought they were burying you, but they were actually planting you. And now, every time you flourish, heaven whispers the truth they refuse to face. Your purpose doesn't need revenge, it only needs time. Number 13. They wanted you to feel powerless, but God let them taste it first. They plotted your downfall, thinking they'd stripped you of every safety net. They took pride in watching doors close on you, mistaking your silence for defeat. They believed that isolating you would make you crumble, not realizing that isolation is often God's secret training ground. They wanted you to depend on them so they could control you, but heaven had already signed your independence papers. What they called your loneliness was actually your initiation into divine authority, a power not built on connections, but on conviction. When they left you without support, they celebrated. They thought you'd finally understand what it felt like to be small, but they didn't realize they were projecting. It was their own insecurity masquerading as dominance. Power to them was the ability to make others beg, but real power never humiliates. It liberates. God watched quietly as they strutted in temporary control, knowing that divine reversals always arrive unannounced. Now those same people are learning firsthand what it feels like to be powerless in a place they once ruled. The same energy they used to isolate you has isolated them. They're surrounded by people who mimic loyalty, but vanish at the first sign of trouble. The same silence they forced on you has become their own, except yours birthed wisdom, and theirs breeds fear. They're crying for help in rooms that have gone cold. Calls go unanswered, messages left on read. They're discovering what you already mastered. That true strength isn't about how many stand with you, but how deeply you stand with God. That's how heaven teaches empathy, through mirrored solitude. God doesn't need to punish people with fire and brimstone. He simply lets them experience the energy they once projected. The loneliness they weaponized has now become their teacher. The silence they mocked you for enduring now echoes in their own homes. They wanted you to feel powerless, but in trying to strip you of control, they forfeited their own. The same tables they flipped on you are the ones they now eat from, and the taste of powerlessness they served so proudly has finally returned to their own plates. Number 14. Their downfall isn't revenge, it's revelation. What's happening to them isn't some cosmic payback orchestrated on your behalf. It's not karma chasing them down because you cried. It's truth finally removing its veil. For so long, they moved through life under false light, pretending, manipulating, convincing others that you were the problem. But divine law always exposes distortion. Their downfall is not God avenging you, it's God unveiling you. It's the moment when the mask slips and reality finally aligns with what heaven saw all along. You never had to retaliate because your silence wasn't weakness, it was evidence. Every time you chose peace instead of pettiness, heaven took notes. Every time you walked away instead of clapping back, God was gathering proof. Now that documentation is being played out in real time. Their public collapse is the spiritual equivalent of an audit. Everything that was built on deceit, ego, and exploitation is crumbling under the weight of its own lies. This isn't vengeance, it's justice unfolding through truth. People often confuse exposure for punishment, but revelation is far more precise. Punishment aims to hurt, revelation aims to correct. The same light that vindicates you is the one that convicts them. You didn't rise to make anyone look bad. You rose because truth can't stay buried forever. Your elevation wasn't meant to shame them. It was meant to show contrast. When light appears, darkness doesn't get destroyed. It just gets seen. Their downfall simply reveals the reality they've been hiding behind charm and manipulation. The connections they built on deceit are collapsing. The influence they held through intimidation is evaporating. Their image is fading because it was never rooted in authenticity. What you're witnessing is divine order re-establishing itself. The universe doesn't need to take sides. It simply balances what's been out of alignment. So, when people say you got revenge, smile quietly, because you didn't get even. You got seen. You didn't destroy them. Truth did. And when truth steps forward, no lie can stand tall beside it. Their downfall isn't about your vindication. It's about divine revelation. The mask fell, and finally, the world can see what energy was ruling behind closed doors. All of this shows one undeniable truth. What was meant to destroy you has only strengthened you. Every lie, every betrayal, every attack, every attempt to bury your name and diminish your spirit has become fuel for your elevation. The chaos, envy, and malice directed at you didn't vanish. It transformed, redirected through divine law, and returned to reveal the truth about those who thought they could control your story. You were never the target. You were always the mirror, the test, the proof that power, grace, and destiny cannot be dictated by human hands. The people who tried to break you are now living in the consequences of their own energy. The silence they imposed on you became your sanctuary. The attacks they calibrated for your old self bounced back because you outgrew them. The judgments they threw became the measure of their own character, exposing cracks in the very foundation they tried to shake. Every plot, every scheme, every whisper of ill intent against you has returned in a reflection they can no longer deny. The very energy they unleashed in envy, fear, and malice has become the evidence of truth and justice. Your rise wasn't about revenge, it was about revelation. Your healing wasn't about proving them wrong, it was about proving yourself right in the eyes of the universe. You didn't fight to win over them, you fought to win over your own growth, and in the process, the universe simply did what it always does. It aligned reality with truth, exposed deception, and elevated the chosen. What they tried to destroy has now become the platform for your purpose, the beacon for your destiny, and the mirror reflecting their own failures. This is a moment to stand in power, not anger. To understand that the spiritual laws governing life are not negotiable, and that divine timing always reveals the hidden. Your journey proves that nothing intended to harm you can outlast the strength, grace, and clarity that already reside within you. The chaos they created is now the evidence of their exposure, while your calm, your peace, and your elevation are proof that destiny cannot be hijacked. If this message resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss these revelations. Like this video to support the truth being shared, comment below with your thoughts and experiences, and share it with anyone who needs to understand how energy, purpose, and divine law work in ways most people will never see coming. Stand in your power, chosen one. Your story is just beginning, and the world is finally catching up to the truth. God bless you.